In our last episode, we saw the empire convulse in the flames of the Greek War of Independence. The Aegean burned, the provinces fractured, and even the victories the Ottomans did achieve were hollow, bought with Egyptian troops and foreign interference. Mahmud II, once a boy in hiding, had begun to show the steel of a ruler. But again and again, his greatest enemy was not abroad but within. This is road to destruction, the world wars. The Janissaries, a corps that no longer fought wars, but made and unmade sultans. Their power had crushed Selim, killed Alemdar, and for years kept Mahmud himself a prisoner inside his own capital. By the 1820s it was clear, no reform, no survival was possible, until the Janissaries themselves were broken. The chance came in 1826. For years Mahmud had been preparing quietly, building loyal regiments on the European model, drilling them in secret, and surrounding himself with advisors who believed that the empire could only be saved by force. The Janissaries, bloated with privilege and jealous of their power, refused every change. They mocked the new drill, scorned the new uniforms, and saw every whisper of reform as a threat to their ancient privileges. When news spread that Mahmud would form a new army to replace them, their response was, as it had always been, revolt. They gathered in their barracks, overturned their cauldrons, the ancient Janissary signal of mutiny, and demanded that the reform be abandoned. But this time the Sultan was ready. Instead of pleading, he raised the banner of the Prophet, the sacred standard kept in the palace since the days of Mehmed the Conqueror. Clerics declared the Janissaries rebels against God and state. Loyal troops, artillerymen, and even common citizens rallied to the Sultan's side. For 3 days, Istanbul shook with violence. Cannons fired into the Janissary barracks, streets filled with smoke. Those who resisted were slaughtered, those who fled were hunted down. When it ended, thousands lay dead. The great squares of Istanbul were heaped with corpses, the streets ran with ash and blood, and the name Janissary, once spoken with awe, became a curse. The corps that had once been the sword of the empire was no more. Like Rome's Praetorian Guard before them, the Janissaries had outlived their purpose. They had gone from guardians to kingmakers, from protectors to predators, and in the end, they were destroyed by the ruler they thought they could control. For Mahmud, this was more than a military confrontation. It was personal. He had hidden in the palace as a boy while Janissaries hunted for him. He had worn the crown under their shadow, never knowing if a riot might end his reign in fire, as it had ended Selim's. Every cannon blast that tore into their barracks was not just the fall of a mutinous corps, but the echo of his own survival. It was vengeance for years of humiliation, for a childhood lived in hiding, for the crown he had worn as their prisoner. It was called the Auspicious Incident, a name that hid the blood and terror of what had happened. Yet it was auspicious in truth, for the empire had been freed from a weight that had dragged it down for centuries. For the first time in living memory, a sultan had destroyed not just a faction, but an entire institution that had defied his authority. Mahmud emerged from the carnage the most powerful sultan in 100 years. He had shown ruthlessness, decisiveness, and above all, the will to reshape the empire by force. The ulama had been used, the people had been frightened, the bureaucracy intimidated. But none of them loved him. The Janissaries were gone, and with them the most stubborn barrier to reform, but also one of the last living links to the empire's ancient traditions. Their destruction made change possible, yet at the same time revealed how deeply the Ottomans still clung to the old ways that gave them identity and cohesion. Mahmud had severed the past to secure the future, but in doing so he exposed a wound that would never fully heal. That every reform would be seen not just as progress, but as betrayal. His successors would inherit this paradox, that the empire could not survive without transformation, yet could not transform without tearing at the very fabric that held it together. The destruction of the Janissaries was more than reform. It was a reckoning. A war not against a foreign enemy, but against the empire's own past. In our next episode, The Sultan's New Order, Mahmud will attempt to rebuild what he has destroyed. New armies, new laws, new dress, even new ways of life will be forced upon the empire. But every reform will cost, and with Europe circling closer, the question is not just whether the Ottomans can be remade, but whether they can be remade fast enough to survive. He had destroyed the past to free the future, but in doing so he made clear to friend and foe alike, the Sultan would rule, or he would kill. This is Road to Destruction, the World Wars.